right, well, I see people still pouring in, but we're going to go ahead and get the ball started on our 14th webinar here today. And so as a couple of points of introduction, number one, we're thrilled to have you here. Hopefully everybody is enjoying these things. I mean, people are still coming back. So as long as we have people showing up and attending these things, we're going to continue to do them. The feedback has been tremendous. We're getting emails and messages on Facebook all the time. And people are genuinely enjoying these things. They're learning, and that's ultimately what our objective is. We're trying to take this period of time where we are locked down and the world is certainly a very different place than what it was even a few months ago, and we're simply attempting to progress and move forward even during the COVID pandemic. So our 14th webinar here today. A couple other things you'll notice on my screen. This is the first time we've had this laid out on the screen. If you are not familiar with the Facebook community group page, so that's the very top link on my screen there, facebook.com/groups/evidence management. We are almost up to 400 members in the community group. The entire purpose of the community group is to get all of you with direct contact to each other. So if you're not in that community group, go to that page, subscribe to it. We'll grant your access to it. And the entire purpose of that page is to allow you to communicate with other people. We're posting stuff there all the time. The recording of this webinar will be posted on the community page. And so that is a great spot. If you got questions, things you've run across, scroll through all the stuff that's in there. There's a couple of hundred posts that have been put into the community group now where people are asking questions. Somebody's saying, hey, I'm using this RMS system. Is anybody else using it? Again, it's just a good spot for people to be able to communicate directly with, right now, almost 400 property and evidence technicians around the country. All right. The next link that is on there, if you are not aware of this, the Evidence Management Institute, which is a partner agency to us, is running a free evidence management training course right now. And so if you go to, let me look at that, evidencemanagement.com/free-training, you can register for our free training. You can get a participation certificate for being in that. Again, on the community page, we've recorded all of those things. So if you've missed any of them, don't worry about it. You can hop in at any time and pick up on the free evidence management training. The last two that I want to point out, trackerproducts.com/TIMS. Take a look at what we're offering when it comes to some of the auditing and even right below that, the free e-health check. All right. One of the things that I'm about to introduce today's panelist here, David Bragg from Bowling Green Police Department. We're about to go through basically what he has done over 5 years to what I would suggest is a solid cleanup of the Bowling Green evidence room. But that e-health check, that link that I have on the screen right there, for many of you, you may be at the beginning of that. Maybe you're halfway into 5 years, but you've not even really started. And the question becomes, where the heck do I even start at? Now, we're going to spend time talking with David today and dig into where do I start? I would suggest to you that link to that e-health check is the place to start. It's through the Evidence Management Institute. We're funding getting that thing done. So anybody that's on the phone call today, if you want to do it's a mini audit, if you will, and it's your way of going in, you fill in a bunch of parameters and you're going to get back a report that you can take, like a PDF generated document that you can take back to your chief or supervisor and say, hey, I've done a bit of an audit. It didn't cost me any money. Here are some suggestions and some things we can do to get started. And so make sure you got that link if you want to check it out. Again, there's no cost to doing that, and you'll get a report produced at the end of it. All right, that is all of my intro, and I want to get that out of the way. Let me introduce David Bragg. David, how are you doing today?
Great.
Excellent. Well, I so appreciate you being here. David was a part of our, I think it was our first webinar we did back, as we just said a moment ago, back on March the 18th. And that we were just getting the ball rolling. It wasn't, we had no idea where this thing was going to go. And so David was a participant on that first call. He's with the Bowling Green Police Department. So Dave, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and just give us some background on David Bragg.
Yeah, sure. That very first webinar I was actually doing from home. We were sort of non-essential personnel at the time, so I was working from home, back to work now, but I'll give you a little bit about myself. I'm in Bowling Green, Kentucky. You don't know where that is? We're about 60 miles north of Nashville, Tennessee. So we're in the south central part of Kentucky. I'm a retired detective from my agency, actually. I retired in 2005. I did some contract investigative work for the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet Inspector General's office for a few years. Got really bored. That got kind of slow. And then sort of a bug was planted in my ear that there would be a retirement here within our agency in our property room. And the chief asked if I would be interested in returning and working in a property room. And at the time I was, and I like a challenge. And I knew it would be a little bit of challenge coming in, but that kind of excites me when that challenge exists. So I accepted that challenge in probably October of 2011. Returned back to work in my home agency. My agency is about 125 officer department. We're in a municipal community of about 70,000 with a county population of about 140,000. There are two full-time evidence custodians. We're both civilians, so I hung up my shield, my gun, and returned back to work as a civilian employee. That's kind of the demographics of our agency and our community.
Yeah, I'm working on getting, you sent me those pictures over, and I'm working on bringing those up right now. So just to reiterate to everybody, the purpose of today is, I mean, we're doing a virtual evidence tour of the Bowling Green PD, but instead of just walking or, having David show us a bunch of stuff in their evidence room and talking in general, what I really wanted to focus on today is what, according to David, what is it that you did over 5 years? Like, to go from where you were at, and he's going to describe the mess here in a moment. And I think is a mess a good word to put with it, David?
Yeah, disorganized. And I'll touch on that a little bit when you're ready for it.
So the point is, though, what we're going to dig into is you walked in the door and you took over. And this was, I mean, it was more than 5 years ago. So I'm saying a 5-year process, but I mean, we're talking now, you've been in the evidence room for 9 years.
Yeah, going on 9 years. 5 years was a good benchmark, though, to start to feel comfortable about some getting things in place and kind of a digging out of the disorganized chaos, maybe. That might be a strong.
Why don't we start with this? Why don't you start us out with what did it look like when you walked into the door? So now we know you were excited, you were going to take over the evidence room. I'm curious, prior to walking to the evidence room, my understanding is, I mean, because you were a part of the department, you'd been in the evidence room or you had seen the evidence room, but you really had no understanding of the inner workings. Is that correct?
Never been in the evidence room, but I'll give you a little historical perspective. So as a detective, I often would check out evidence for review or, for trial prep. So I remember probably a year prior to retiring, we had a murder trial coming up, and we had probably 100 pieces of evidence. So I remember coming to check out that evidence, and guess how many signatures I had to do? 100 times for each individual piece of evidence to maintain the chain of custody. This was in 2000, probably 4. I had been urging, kind of talking to the evidence staff about, you need to take a look at barcoding. We were still using paper at the time. So, we were still kind of an antique system of managing evidence. So I was signing out 100 pieces of evidence with 100 signatures. Terrible thing to track that volume of evidence. So there's the evidence room. So, this kind of resonates with me. Back in the mid 70s, I remember walking to a grocery store and I turned and went down the aisle, and there was the store manager who I happened to graduate from high school with. He had this contraption in his hand that looked like a gun, and he was scanning barcodes on grocery store items and the shelves. And I said, "What in the world are you doing?" And he said, "I'm doing inventory. I'm taking inventory of our stock." So barcoding technology has been around for a long time, and grocery stores were using that back in the 70s. So in the late 90s, I was urging our evidence staff to take a look at barcoding. That's got to be a way to ease up the burden of managing evidence. And it probably was in its infancy when it comes to evidence management. I really don't know, but I suspect it probably was. Probably not a lot of companies out there that have barcoding for evidence management. But I was trying to plant the seed to look at technology. And I think there was some hesitation to embrace that technology because it just, it was new and it was uncomfortable to people. People were used to using paper, and that's where we were.
Yeah.
So
and that was all the way up. The thing is, you're not talking even the 90s. I mean, you were using pen and paper and antiquated technology all the way up into the 2010.
Okay, yeah. So fast forward, I returned back out of retirement to work in the property room. This is in 2012. So we were still using the hybrid system of kind of paper and computer. Okay, so we went to, after my retirement, we went to a computerized evidence management system, which was a module that came with our records management system. It was pretty awful. So returning to work, we had barcodes printed and placed on the package, but also accompanying that package and with that barcode label was a paper chain of custody form. So while we had a barcode attached to the package, it was like a rock being attached. It didn't serve any purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So we're still using paper registers for chain of custody and signing out evidence. So I knew we were coming in with a challenge. So I took it on myself one day to try to determine, on the average, how many keystrokes does it take from the time an officer seizes a piece of evidence until we accept it into permanent storage. And we were using a computer at the time with a module from our records management system. I counted almost 200 keystrokes that it took to get that into permanent storage. Now that's unbelievable that you're taking that much time and resources away from what you could be doing in an evidence room, because your emphasis was particularly focused on the intake and not getting things out of here or managing the inventory.
Yeah, I think one of the things I want to throw out right now that I think is really important with what you said, a lot of people that come into a mess, and again, everybody is going to have a different level of whatever they're looking at. What I like best about what you're saying is one of the very first things you did was look at what is taking time. Man, I think that is always a great place to start, because so many people would say, I don't have time. They'll say it today. I mean, even 2020, I don't have time. I can't do dispositions. I can't do this. I simply do not have enough time. And I think you got to sit down and literally evaluate what is taking your time. I mean, that is such a perfect place to start.
Yeah. And that's a big consumer of time, is the intake of the evidence.
Mm-hmm.
So that was consuming a lot of time. So shortly after I've been here, I had another detective to show up to check some things out for a murder trial. So this is deja vu.
Yeah.
Yeah. We had 100 and some items in that case. And I still, from 2005, when I was still working here, fast forward to 2012, I was doing the same thing. I'm signing out 100 pieces of evidence and getting a signature from that officer 100 times. So I knew this is not right. Something has to change. We're in the year 2012.
Yeah.
So that was a bit of a challenge. Another challenge. Now look, we're in a modern facility. This facility was built in the late 1990s, so we're in a very modern, clean, no mold, no leakage. It's a good building. But it was somewhat of a disorganized chaos on evidence management. There was no compromise of integrity. The items were here. It was kind of a chaotic mess. Mm-hmm. So part of the problem too, I think, and I may get tomatoes thrown at me here for this, but a staffing issue. If you have staff who are particularly by nature unorganized, That's going to hurt your inventory management because a disorganized person can't do inventory management.
Yeah.
And that
Hey,
was a little
listen,
bit.
somebody may throw a tomato at you on that, but that's just a fact of life. And that's just something you realized that, and so often in police departments, we don't go down the road of who's the best fit for the job.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like we just need a body, and it doesn't matter that they don't even meet simple abilities to coordinate or organize. We're just throwing somebody in there.
Right. Yeah. So among the staff, and again, it was just 2 staff members too, just like it is today. I detected there's no sense of ownership of where you work. You didn't really take pride, and it was so that contributed to it. So the 2 main factors that contributed to our problems were, I think, probably uh, a terrible evidence management system and a disorganized, maybe burnout staff, I'll call it.
Yeah.
So, you combine those 2 and you're going to have some problems.
Yep.
And the third thing was a lack of purging. A purging has not occurred here for a good while. So I'm going back through. There's no way that we could do an automated scan barcoding inventory at that time. It was impossible. So you were having to do a manual inventory. So I just went down through every row of every shelf, just arbitrarily pulling items out and taking a glance at it. Just basically a cursory search. I'm finding evidence, misdemeanor evidence that are 7 and 8 years old. Statute of limitations is long and expired. And it's no sense for a seized license plate to be sitting in here for 8, 9 years. So we had a lot of that.
At this point, you're just trying to make an assessment of everything. I mean, you're not digging in, you're not doing major overhauls. You're just trying to figure out where you're at.
Right. I basically was thrown in a swimming pool and was trying to swim and figure out what was going on.
Yeah.
But that's
curious,
okay.
Let me ask you
I
another
didn't
question
mind the
before you
challenge.
run down the road too far. What did the discussion look like? Were you dealing with the chief directly, or how high up was your chain of command that you were reporting to?
Yeah, the chief is not my direct chain of command, but I had discussions with the chief prior to retirement. And basically, the discussion was, if you're hired, this is what we want you to focus on. Organizing place, getting it in good shape. We want our evidence room top notch. So that was basically the discussion. The chief was on board for it.
Yeah.
So that was in my favor.
Yeah.
So, after looking at all these problems, we had unprocessed court orders for disposal. I mean, I find court orders that was 2 and 3 years old that had not been processed and the items disposed of. So there were just some issues that we had to address. So how do we turn things around? I go a few weeks ago, Sean Henderson from Evidence Management Institute mentioned leading without authority. And basically what he was saying is that you may not, and I'm not in a leadership position, and it wasn't at the time. You may not be in a leadership position, but you can lead without authority by having influence.
Yeah.
So how do you gain that influence, and how do you take advantage of it? So what I looked at was I started doing some research and did some graphs and some charts, and I needed to sell the notion that we need a major overhaul of our records, of our evidence management system. We got to have it. So it's good to talk about it, but unless you can show the proof, unless you can articulate and demonstrate to your boss or the chief or whoever that may be, you're probably not going to gain much traction.
Yeah.
So I put this in charts and graphs and said, this is where we are. We got to, I talked about the 200 keystrokes of getting a piece of evidence entered. Oh. So that was probably in December of 2012. So the chief basically says, do what you need to do. If we need new software, let's get new software. So I reached out to a few vendors.
What I want to reiterate is you didn't just walk in and say, I need new software or this is a problem. You articulated exactly where the pain points were at.
That's right. That's exactly right. And it's much easier to sell when you can do that.
Yeah.
I don't think you can sell a concept if you just talk about it and you don't have any proof. You can't articulate or demonstrate what you're asking for or what you need.
Right.
So probably in 2012, I said, look, we need to ditch our records management system evidence module. It's inadequate at best. It's not robust. It can't do the job, and we have to have a robust system.
Yeah.
So I started looking at robust systems and did some demos. Your company is one of the ones I did a demo on. I actually demoed it probably for 2 or 3 months, Ben. I don't know if you remember that, but you gave me
I definitely remember, David. I remember a lot of phone calls.
I
Believe me, I definitely
not,
remember that.
yeah, this is not a sale to tracker product, but this is a reality. This is what happened. So I demoed several companies' products. So end up demoing the tracker product. We ended up purchasing that product. So that was the first step. Second step probably that occurred was administrative purge. We did an administrative purge probably of, well, now let me back up a little bit. That administrative purge didn't occur until we actually purchased tracker products, put it in place, got all of our inventory moved into tracker products. And I remember, actually, you came down for that. I remember, I don't know if you remember this or not, but I remember you saying something to this effect. When this is all and done, you're going to wake up the next day and come into work, and it was like you're going to walk into a new world, or the light switch is just got thrown on when you walk in, when you start using this product.
Yeah.
And that was a dead on comment. I don't know if you recall saying that, but that was a dead on comment. It's like a light switch had been turned on. We could actually manage inventory. I could see data. I could run reports. I could do inventory. So that, that probably was the single most thing that relieved the tension or the of the evidence room.
Yeah.
So shortly after that, I started looking at all the data and looking at all the evidence. So I approached we in Kentucky, we're kind of unique. We have 2 prosecutors' office. We have 2 district court. We have two courts, circuit court and district courts.
Mm-hmm.
Circuit courts handle felonies, district courts handle misdemeanors. And we had several divisions of each of those. So I approached each elected prosecutor and said, we need to do an administrative purge. We need to get rid of some old evidence quickly, just for a quick cleanup. So I asked them, can we look at a target date, and you look at your court dockets and your court cases, and if all those cases from this date backwards are adjudicated, can we just get rid of this evidence, minus those, money, guns and so forth, and minus violent crimes, rapes, murders, and so forth.
Yeah.
So both prosecutors agreed to do that. We did a mass administrative purge, and I think in a year and a half, I'm looking at about 12,000 items that were purged just from administrative purge, not authorized by officer or court orders. That was just a mass administrative purge.
I'm curious, how do you think, because I mean, that right there, what you're talking about, I'm sure the questions are about to come flooding in because people want to know about disposition. Did you have to twist any arms? What was your general posture when you went to the prosecutors to say, hey, I need to do something we've never done before? It's very important to be able to do something like that. How did you pull that off with them? Were they just accommodating, or what was it?
I invited them over for a tour. so
there's the answer. Bring them in.
Both of them at the same time. So, here, come tour. Let's, here's the date. Show up. My boss was there. Both prosecutors showed up. They were pretty astonished. And I said, look, this is what we're facing at, and I would pull out an item for our prosecutor who handles all the misdemeanor cases. And I say, look, here's here's a seized license plate from an improper registered car from 8 years ago. We still have it.
Right.
Here's a marijuana joint from 8 years ago on a misdemeanor possession. We still have it. This is what's bogging us down. This is what's cluttering up our room. We need some immediate relief.
Yeah.
So both prosecutors saw that. They went back, took a look at their dockets, all their cases, determined from a certain date backwards that all the cases are settled. And they each did a memo saying, purge out that data, minus those exceptions of money and so forth, and get rid of it. And that's what we did. So we had, we had a quick purge. It took about a year because we wanted to make sure we weren't getting rid of some needed stuff. But 11 or 12,000 item purge. So that was a start.
Now, one other thing, Dave, one other thing I remember about your evidence room, and I remember a lot of those discussions. I don't particularly remember what you had just said about the light switch, but one thing I remember is when you went from your RMS system into our evidence management system, we brought in all of that data out of the old system. And there were several 100,000 records. I remember it was a really large number. And part of the problem, first of all, I would advise everybody that's listening, if you move from a records management into an evidence management system, you want all of that data in there. But I'm going to say this with a big caution, all right? If all you do is bring that data in and leave it there, and you don't have a plan in place for how you're going to scrub it and clean it and go from, because as far as I was concerned with David, we were bringing in a pile of unknown. I won't say it was a pile of crap because you didn't know, but it was a pile of unknown. And so the goal was, and I do remember saying this is what I remember saying, that it was going to be years for you to do this. I didn't know if it was going to be 5 years or how many years, but I said, David, we're going to throw all of this evidence in there. We don't know what's here, what's not here. But over the next couple of years, you're going to work on touching every piece of evidence and shifting it from what I'll call an unclean part of the evidence room into a clean part. And, new evidence coming in the door goes into the clean part. And so is that ultimately how that did roll out? Did you wind up touching 200,000 pieces of evidence and shifting everything around?
I did not, but here, we had, I told you we had a barcode label attached since 2007. So you were able to take that code, the barcode from the old system, even though it was non-functional and it didn't serve a purpose at the time, and you were able to migrate that data over. So this is what I did. I asked our IT staff, look, on our current RMS prior to going to Tracker, I said, would you export all that to a spreadsheet? And I want to have I want to have all that information handy. So when the data was migrated from our old system to the new system of Tracker, I want to do some benchmark testing. So I'm gonna test out, just randomly, just walk through for a few weeks, pull items, and see if the data matched up. And it matched up. So there was no, essentially there were, I would say, zero hiccups during the migration of it. But I want to make sure that that it was coming over okay. So it did.
Right.
So that was a big clean, and the light switch did go off. Or on. The light switch came on. When we from day one, when we turned off the old system, went to the new system, it was a new world.
No more 100 signature checkouts at that point.
No more 100. The emphasis shifted from intake of evidence into permanent storage to managing what you already have and trying to get rid of it, purging, disposition.
Do you care? Let me ask you a question about that. Would you even have an estimate as to, prior to implementation of a system that was working, well, whatever the case, do you have any idea how much time in the day was spent on the intake and getting it on the shelf process versus what it is today? You even have a guess on that?
I don't. I can tell you, and the data is still true today as it was, then. Currently we're averaging probably, between 700 and 750 items per month.
Yeah.
And it probably wasn't far off that in 2012 when we went
Yeah.
to. So I can tell you that sometimes it was a little nauseating to come in and think, gee, I've got to spend 3/4 of my day or all
Yeah.
morning at least of intaking this stuff because I've got to go through all these keystrokes, doing manual typing and locating it to a shelf. So it wasn't, initially I thought, I, I don't want to do, I'm not sure I want to do this,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know, even though I was glad to take a challenge, I thought this is, uh,
Too much. Yeah.
yeah, this is too much. This is too much of an antique way of doing
Yeah.
inventory or inventory management. So
I cannot emphasize enough. I guess I'll restate myself. You have got to look at how much time you're spending on doing all of your tasks in a given day. And I've said it before. I think 3/4 of your day has to be consumed by management of the evidence, the getting it out the door, inventories or things like that. You can, if you're spending 75 to 80% of your day just getting it in the door, you will not have any time to get it out the door. And so you have to look at whatever it is that shifts the tables to get it to where that intake is significantly faster. It's got to be, I mean, it's got to be minutes in a day. It can't be hours.
yeah, and that's where we were at the time until we made some changes. So I think if what rises to the top of what you need to do to turn your evidence room around are a couple of things. Is first of all, well, you got to have the support of the department, but you can also, even if you don't have a lot of support from the department, I'll go back to what Sean Henderson said is you can lead sometimes or oftentimes without authority. There's just a lot of things you could do to influence how things are run in your evidence room. And that's
Mm-hmm.
what we were doing. But we had the support of the department too, with the blessings of the chief. The chief he was on board with this initially. So the two things that kind of, I think, rises to the top is you got to, if you don't have a good evidence management system, whether you're using paper or some inadequate module to your RMS system, you gotta reevaluate that. You just
Right.
have to. And secondly is whoever's working in your evidence room has to be organized. They have to like what they're doing.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you get two strikes against you already.
Yeah. Yeah. So
So
just to
there's,
go through a couple, I just want to show off a couple of pictures here, if just what are on my screen, but let me just sort of highlight them. High density shelving. When did you install that? Was that
no,
there in
that,
two?
yeah, that was there. That's why I said we were in a modern facility. It's just we had
Right.
some old ways of doing business.
Yeah.
Uh, so that was in place. That was now we have an off-site storage facility which handles our bulk. It was
Mhm.
really a mess.
Yeah.
There's some shelving there. You can see there's some biohazard sections,
Yeah.
uh,
I mean,
storage.
I just like seeing the uniformity of the thing. So I see you put a container on here. Any reason you put that on particularly?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about that in a minute.
Okay. Come back to that.
Yeah, we'll come back to that.
Okay. So I'm just showing off some other pictures in your evidence room.
Yeah, that's a gun room, and it's you have to key swipe, to get into that. So it leaves an audit trail who enters the gun room or the drug room. That's our gun room.
Okay.
That's our intake area where the officers come in and process their evidence and prep it for packaging and then deposit in those pass-through temporary
Right.
lockers you see
Yeah.
there. There's a couple of workstations and officers can start entering the data of what they seized, and they can actually do that from their cars too, from their mobile data computers, so they can start that
Yeah.
process.
Yeah, the thing that stands out to me when I see some of these pictures, like you just elaborated a minute ago, is you had a very modern facility. I mean, when you look at, those temporary lockers, those are nice looking lockers. It's a nice processing area. And in the end, getting this stuff cleaned up is not any one thing. It's not just evidence management software. It's not just getting lockers. It is, that's what that audit, that's what our total evidence management solution is all about. Is this is part of a much bigger package, and you got to look at all these different things, because if any one piece is out of place, it can really hamper it. And I would argue not having a good evidence management system is the worst part that could be out of place, because you can make up a lot of ground with having a good evidence management system. So I think you had mentioned this was a construction project you guys were working on.
Yeah, it's on our lot, on our grounds here. We had a empty lot, so we are building a new, and I'll talk about that in a minute. We're building a new bulk storage facility to handle our large power tools and so forth. It's a 2-story facility there. You see there in the apex where it comes together, with about 10 car bays. So what we intend to do with that second level there is we're going to archive all of our long-term storage, our murder cases, our long-term retention of DNA. We're going to archive that on our second level. That's where the containers come in, and I want to talk about that in just a minute. Containers, because initially you and I had a discussion about that, and I was opposed to containers, and boy was I wrong. So.
Hey, there's some people on my end, like there's a Beth Bennett I work with who just has a hard time admitting when I'm right. Maybe I just need to hear you say that again one more time, David. Was I right about something?
Yeah, I'll explain that in a minute. And that's what's going on right now. Anyway, that construction project will be done here in probably about a month. So that will free up some space here in our headquarters. We get rid of this long-term, murder cases that we've got to keep for 100 years. That can be archived out. There's the key swipe to get in.
Yeah.
It was I guess that's called a Dutch door. You can serve people who are coming up. Officers could check out.
Okay. Anything else you want to show here, or do you want to go back to the container and talk about that?
Yeah, I'm gonna go back to the container. So we're getting ready to move probably 7,000 items to that. It's not off-site anymore. It's on-site but detached on our department lot, bulk storage facility. So I've got about 7,000 items to potentially to move, both bulk items and both archive items of murder evidence and DNA retention stuff. So I'm thinking, I'm kind of dreading this, moving 7,000 items. So I remember maybe a year.
Just to elaborate, it's not just picking up a box and moving it. You're going into the software and accounting for the fact that it's leaving the main facility and going to the other one.
And scanning every one of them, scanning every single item. So I remember, I don't know, when Tracker started looking at convenience containers, I was on the conference call. I was initially against it.
Yeah.
And I said, I don't think that's a good idea. And then in prepping for this move, I think, wow, those convenience containers. So what we've been doing here is we're taking all this archive evidence, scanning it into a convenience container, sealing it up, and it's been inventoried, sealing that container up. And then when we get ready to move, the only thing I have to do is scan that one container.
Yeah.
And then scan it to the new location, and all of those 50 items that's in that convenience container go with it.
Right.
So that, and then in the future, when it comes time to inventory, you just scan that, assuming the seal hasn't been broken and something taken out of it,
Now, Dave, I want to full admittal here. A client of ours suggested that, and I wasn't even in favor of it. I don't know if that person's on the phone here, but when it was first thrown out, this idea of putting a label on a container and just automatically moving items in it, I was opposed to the notion, because I felt like you should scan every item, but through, I wouldn't say it was coercion, but I listened and I thought, man, that wound up being a really good thing, and a lot of people are using them.
I've been using them for the past, during this COVID-19, when we're kind of semi-shut down, I'm doing these convenience containers. So I've about got them all done. So the day comes that we move, instead of scanning 7,000 items to move, I'm just going to probably do a few hundred, and that's it. Everything goes with it.
That's awesome. You know
So
what? Listen, I love that. That maybe there's people on here that would say that doesn't matter to me, but I love hearing the fact that something we developed is being used in a scenario where, I mean, that's good feedback.
well, it matters when it comes time. If you have to move, it matters, or if you have to do inventory. So after
Yep.
we move, as long as those seals are intact and not been broken,
Yeah.
I can safely assume that the contents of that package are still in there, and all I have to do is scan that container barcode
Sure.
when I'm doing inventory. Makes it much more simple.
Yep.
So,
So let's take a few minutes. And by the way, for everybody that's listening, we've probably got a few more minutes that I've got some questions for David. But if you've got questions, nobody has submitted anything. And that doesn't mean that there's not a lot of people on here. We got a lot of people that are watching this right now, but no questions have come in. But if you have a question of Dave, now is a good time to throw it out. I've got a couple more I'm going to ask. And if we get nothing, we'll wrap it up. But as long as we've got questions coming in, we'll keep going. I want to talk a moment. So you've cleaned up, okay? I mean, I can see looking at your aisles, it's clean. You're using statistics. You're spending more time doing doing dispo than you are entry. Those are all really, really awesome things, but you're not done there. You're doing more. And I want to talk about you had mentioned this a long time ago, but I want to elaborate on it a little bit more. What are you doing now to really ratchet up dispo even more than what it is?
yeah, well, on that data and statistics, the graphs and charts, that was used actually by our chief to help sell the project for that bulk construction. So if you've got the data, use it to your advantage. That data was actually used, particularly if you see that trend chart down in the lower left-hand corner. Now we had a little dip there, but that dip is attributed to we're not storing hard copy body cam car camera here now in our evidence stream. So that went down, but that trend is still continuing. So you got to have room. Usually you don't have a storage space problem. You usually have a purging problem. But we did have a storage space problem for our bulk facility. So these charts and graphs were used to help sell the notion to our local commission to build this $1.2 million facility. So
there's no way. Do not go in the door asking for $1.2 million and not having anything to back it up without some solid statistics about why you're trying to do what you're doing, for sure.
It won't happen. So where are we right now? Well, our time management, our human resource management, the emphasis still focused on dispositions and not intake. And that occurred ever since we ditched our old evidence management system. So that emphasis has changed and it's still occurring and it's freeing us up. We've developed packaging manuals to help to kind of bring in packaging compliance and make sure everything's done the way it needs to be done and it's consistent. We're right now in the process, and the COVID-19 hit and it has put everything on hold right now. We still need work in our disposition policy, and we were working on that, and it was probably getting ready to go through some approval process, and the COVID-19 hit, and it kind of sidelined some things. So that's what's going on now, and I expect when we get through this hump of this COVID-19, it'll be back on the table. So we're going to look at disposition policy. We've got our prosecutors on board. So basically, our disposition policy is we're going to take a look at our nonviolent crimes, like your burglaries, your criminal mischief, and drug cases, and so forth. And we're going to implement a policy similar to this, that if you have evidence in a case in which there is a suspect, but no action has been taken within 3 years of the offense date, kill the case, kill the evidence. Makes sense. So that's going to automatically get rid of some evidence, so we don't have to hold it in perpetuity like we used to. Our courts now, we've got our prosecutor's office working with the courts where the prosecutor's office are preparing disposition orders in advance of when a defendant pleads guilty on the day of sentencing. They'll have those orders prepared, and the judge will sign it, go to the clerk's office, and it'll get forwarded back to us. So that was just starting when the COVID-19 hit, and that court action kind of slowed up as well. Now, one of the things that I'm excited about, that we have been sending out yearly officer disposition sheets, hard copy. This is what you have in evidence. So it may be 50 sheets of paper with 25 items on each sheet. So take a look at it, review it, and tell us what we can get rid of, what we need to keep. So we're going to look at auto disposition, and we were ready to getting ready to pull the trigger on that, and this COVID hit again. So that's where we are now. I think that's going to free up a lot of officers' time. I kind of informally polled some officers. Would you rather once a year get 40 pages of evidence and go through and review it, make a decision on whether it needs to stay or go, or would you rather have it trickle in? And that was a no-brainer. So most everybody, I don't think anybody said I'd rather get the 50 pages of evidence. So we're looking at auto disposition. I expect that probably to be implemented sometime maybe toward this calendar year when we get through this pandemic crisis.
So just to elaborate on that a little bit, I'm not turning this into a demo of our software, but it does need to be stated that what he's talking about is a feature within our product where it'll send out email notifications to an officer that an item is up for review. So instead of David preparing the documents and sending it out in bulk like what he was doing, now he's using the technology and the system to trickle these notifications out in an automated way. And it should take what I would say is a good process anyways and really make it even better. And so I just wanted to elaborate on that a little bit. David, I do have a couple of questions that have come in if you're ready to answer a few. Somebody asked the question is, what type of container? Is this set up as a separate location? And I think that may be more software specific, but in the end, yes, it's a location within our system, but it's very specific in the fact that it's labeled a container, which means it's sort of sealed and items move in bulk instead of so it is a separate feature within how you set up a location in our software. But if you are using our software, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on this right now, look into how containers work, because what he's describing right there is exactly why you have containers, is the ability to package things up, seal it, and now scan one barcode and everything within it moves. Okay. One of our new people asked, can you destroy firearms in Kentucky? Do you guys do your own firearm destruction?
No, there's a state law in Kentucky that you cannot destroy firearms. They have to go to a central repository, and the repository is actually run by the Kentucky State Police. And about once a quarter, that repository has an auction to licensed firearm dealers. Those firearms get sold back out. That money is generated, goes into a fund to help buy primarily body armor for police agencies, but some other law enforcement equipment. So no firearms.
Yeah. So the next question. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yep.
Yeah. No. So no firearms get destroyed.
Okay. So the next question, what I want to do is somebody's asking, don't answer this question yet, David. I'm going to use some of these statistics to support where I'm going with this. But somebody asked the questions, how many evidence staff do you have beside yourself? Don't answer that. Hold on one second, David. I want to show you, first of all, just some of the statistics he was talking about earlier. They've been just a little under 700 items in a couple of months, and they've gotten as high as about 950. So you can see they're averaging 800, 850 items in a given month, okay? This is what their 5-year disposition looks like. So the red line is how much disposition they're doing in that time. The green or the blue is how much stuff is coming in. So last year in 2019, they got rid of, 2,000 more items than what they brought in. Now, and this is without having that auto disposition in place. So this is where he's really trying to kick that into high gear. He was explaining this a little bit ago. This is a trend line, how much stuff is coming in versus going out, but it's just presented in a little bit of a different way. And this is, now, David, is this how much inventory is in your evidence room in total? Is that what you're telling me here?
Yeah, at the end of the year. So, we're creeping back up, but we are increasingly taking in more evidence over the years. So using the data from our evidence management system, in the last 8 years, we've been averaging a 7.5% increase in evidence collected each year. So our evidence collection is going up. We're gonna have to tackle dispositions even more than we are now. So that's where auto disposition, I think, is going to help, combined with those court orders that are being prepared by the prosecutor's office at the time of final sentencing of the defendants.
I'm just curious. Let me ask you to let's get into prophecy for a moment. Let's start imagining a few years down the road. I'm curious, if you implement auto dispo and you continue to get support from your courts doing the things that you're doing, what do you think your inventory is going to look like? Let's go 5 years down the road. Do you expect it to be less than 44,609 items? Is it going to be more? Do you even have what you're desiring to get?
Yeah, I would hope it's not 44,609. I hope that drastically drops. And I can tell you, one of the things, here's what consumes a lot of our inventory right now. And I don't know how many agencies do this, but media files, crime scene photos, either audio or video recorded interviews account for, I'm guessing right here, probably not far from 50% of our intake. That's a lot of media. Now, right now, we're not storing those interviews or photos, virtually on the cloud anywhere. They're burned to a CD or DVD and logged into evidence. So that's another thing I think you can look at, is if you could get those stored on the cloud somehow, which not somehow, I know you can do that, but if you adopted that philosophy of doing that, then my inventory could probably potentially drop by 50%.
Yeah. Listen, all of these things you're saying, again, having a game plan, going about executing this, and I didn't even ask the question. Tell me how many full-time staff you have, including yourself.
Two of us.
Right.
And it's adequate. The 2 is adequate. Yeah.
And for what you're bringing in, I'm telling you, it is you're doing amazing work with 2 people, because some people would say this can't all be done with 2 people when you look at what your intake looks like. But that's what I've liked about David, is he's a very organized person. He takes into the concept of leadership and is willing to make the decisions that need to be made. And I guess the last thing I want to say is, you cannot do this stuff overnight. But man, you can get a game plan in place very quickly. You can do some of that audit report. You can get a game plan in place and say, we're going to start making movement in that direction. Just keep in mind, it takes a while. I mean, David's been at this for 8 years to get to where he's at right now. He didn't walk in on day one and it looked like it did, and he wasn't operating the way that he was. But I'm fairly confident that when David's gone, and do you have any, when are you leaving, David? Do you have any plans?
Not at the moment, no. My colleague's probably listening. She keeps asking me if I'm going to leave or not. So.
All right, it's time for you to go. All right. I don't see any other questions coming in, David. Is there any last comments you want to make to everybody? Or are you feeling pretty good with where you landed here?
No, I'm feeling pretty good. Just, get organized if you're not, because that's a strike. If you can't get organized, or you got to get organized somehow. And if you're using paper, if you got a handful of evidence coming in a year, paper might be okay. If you've got hundreds, or particularly thousands of items coming in, you got to look at your evidence management system to, and this is not an endorsement of a particular product, but you have to look at your evidence management system. So, and use that data to your advantage.
Us, Dave. We've done a really good job staying away from endorsements today. You can go ahead and endorse us. This is a Tracker Products event. David is endorsing Tracker Products.
Yeah. Well, I did test your product for probably 2 or 3 months.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I
there
will
you
give
go.
you that. Listen, David spent more time, and before he bought, he spent as much time investigating us as anybody. So, all right, well, David, I'm going to let you go here today, man. I really appreciate your time. You've been fantastic today. I know everybody appreciates all your comments and feedback. And so, everybody, thank you for being here today. Enjoyed doing webinar number 14, and we'll be back with number 15 next week. So have a good day. Again, David, thank you very much.
Okay, see you.
Bye-bye.